Hi, everyone. This is an emergency, I stress that word, episode of the Promotional Intelligence Podcast. FDA Unified Agenda has updated, now includes an entry announcing the agency's intention to issue a proposed notice of rulemaking to remove the adequate provision, quote unquote, loophole, as they call it. This new proposed rule would require full disclosure of risk information in broadcast television and radio ads. Let's start with what's the unified agenda and walk through the details from there. All right, Jason, take it away.
Yeah, so the unified agenda is something we haven't seen much in this current administration. The unified agenda gets posted every 6 months. There's a spring and a fall unified agenda. And this is done across all agencies. This is a government-wide posting. And this is where the government posts the new rules and regulations that they intend to draft and post in usually the coming year. It can be longer, it can be a couple years out, but this is basically a notice of what they intend to do from a regulatory perspective. And we saw that at some point in the last couple of days, the unified agenda has updated, and now there's a whole bunch of new regulations that not just the government in general, but FDA in particular has announced. And within that list is this new entry, which they're going to talk about basically closing, as you said, what they call the adequate provision loophole. So let me share my screen and we will take a look at what they've posted and what they're suggesting that they're going to do. This is the announced rule that was added to the unified agenda. It's titled Transparency in Direct-to-Consumer Advertising. And in the abstract, this is the high-level explanation for what the agency says they intend to do with this new rule. They're saying that they're going to revise 21 CFR 2021 to remove the option to make adequate provision by disclosing risk on the advertisement itself. And basically what that means is they're saying that they're going to now modify or revise 21 CFR 2021 to require that in broadcast advertisements that all of the risk information be presented. And specifically, they're saying that they're going to modify 2021 E1IB to close what they call the adequate provision loophole. If we look at that citation in the regulation, we're going to flip over to 2021 here. The brief summary and adequate provision regulation is here. And what this tells industry is that you have two ways of presenting risk information in broadcast advertisements. The first way is to include a brief summary of all necessary information related to the side effects and contraindications. This is typically what you would see in, say, an ISI. But for most products, that's too much information. It won't fit in, say, a 60, 90, 120-second ad block that you typically see on broadcast television or radio ad spots. Acknowledging this, the regulation says that you have the option to make adequate provision. That means that you are giving a pathway to disseminate the approved or permitted product labeling in conjunction with the broadcast advertisement. So that's the adequate provision. What do you think the impact on advertising?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's immediately where my head goes. It's really hard to envision what this would be like if they changed the regs. I guess we would look at the length of the TV and radio ads would be extended if industry is still intent on advertising DTC TV broadcasts and radio broadcasts. My suspicions are that industry might reallocate funds to HCP directed promotional efforts, which historically they've spent more money on anyway. It's kind of not something that's readily talked about. We hear about DTC all the time. I'm thinking maybe social media advertising, which has already superseded TV broadcast in terms of relevance and potentially spend, might continue to uptick as a result. I just don't see a scenario where U.S. pharma companies are going to go silent. So what about timing and what's the process? I'm not familiar myself, so I think it'd be really good for you to walk through kind of what the next steps would be after getting an announcement like this.
Sure. So let's take a look at the announcement that they put up. And there's some information in here that's important to take a look at. The first thing here in the timetable section is that it appears that they're targeting the notice of proposed rulemaking to happen sometime on or around December of 2026. Now, it's important to note that these deadlines are very hard to hit. It's as someone who worked on the CCN final rule, it's very hard to hit these days. There's a lot of things that have to happen behind the scenes to hit that target date. But what does stand out to me is that they are suggesting that this is going to happen in December, which as we know, we have a midterm election coming up. So I don't think we should overlook the fact that this could be something that they're doing in conjunction with the upcoming election, whether that's just messaging to say that they're moving along with their stated objective to curtail prescription drug advertising. I think it is important to note that they are targeting that December timeline. But that said, what will happen next is they will issue a notice of proposed rulemaking. That is the process of issuing a proposed rule. And at the time that the proposed rule is displayed, the agency will open a public docket where stakeholders and impacted industry can provide comments. That comment period is usually open for about 60 days. So there will be an opportunity for industry to provide comment and feedback on that proposed rule. After that comment period closes, the FDA is required by law to review those comments. They will have to respond to those comments in the final rule, but they don't necessarily have to revise the final rule to respond to those comments. So it is entirely possible that what we see in the proposed rule could look very similar to what ends up in the final rule. Now, again, we don't know when the final rule would publish, but typically once a final rule publishes, regulated industry is given a 30-day transition period. But I do want to note something. We see that the agency contact here is listed as Lowell Zeta, the Deputy Commissioner for Strategic Initiatives. If you go back and you look at how the clear, conspicuous, and neutral final rule was posted in the Unified Agenda back in 2022, Katie Gray, who was the Office Director of OPDP at that time, was listed as the point of contact. So this is something different than what we've seen with the CCM final rule. It appears that this initiative is being led by the commissioner's office. And this is very unusual because we don't have a Senate confirmed commissioner in place right now. Proposing this kind of change to an existing regulation, this coming out of the deputy commissioner's office is somewhat unusual, something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. But that's kind of what I'm seeing right now as far as timing.
That's a lot. And I agree. The timing is particularly of interest. And I agree. It is very aggressive to try to force something this huge onto an industry as big as pharma by the end of the year. One thing that stood out to me was just kind of, I guess, two things. The overall tone of the announcement is very sensational and I'd say misleading how they're describing adequate provision as a quote unquote loophole. We've been hearing that for a year now. And it's just one of those things that the more they say it, maybe it becomes truth. But I like to push back that that's not a loophole. The other thing I noticed is that they're saying that this is transparency. The focus is on presentation of safety, but then the rhetoric quickly pivots to the cost of prescription drugs, and they haven't really tied any sort of substantial evidence to that connection. And you're just kind of tossing it out there as fact. So I think that this is a very complicated issue. I think we all agree that drug prices are high in the United States, but it's not as simple as tying it to because of TV ads. So it's a much more complicated issue than that. And we don't have time to cover that today, but that's just something that stuck out to me personally. What about you, Jason? Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely a complex issue. Since September of 2025, the agency has, one, they said that they're going to do this. And I think people who are watching the executive memo that came out of the White House, the press releases, I think this is one of the things that was kind of anticipated. I don't think that this is really an unexpected development. I think it's not the most robust approach to trying to achieve what they're trying to do. It's going to expose them to a lot of legal challenges. I think this is where the lawyers are going to come in and really do their thing, because I think that there's a number of challenges, whether that's under the First Amendment, whether that's under the Administrative Procedure Act. I don't know if somebody's going to try to take a Loper Bright out for a walk on this. I think there's a number of things that the lawyers in pharma are going to be able to challenge this under. I think there's a lot of questions too around when those legal challenges are going to develop. This is the first evidence that the agency intends to follow through on the things that they talked about in that press release and the executive memo. This is creating a lot of uncertainty for industry right now. If you're trying to figure out where you're going to spend your ad dollars in the year ahead, do you invest in creating TV ads knowing that this is coming? As you said, do we pivot to social media now? This is going to raise a lot of questions for industry, and this could open up some legal challenges earlier than we expect. We saw with drug pricing regulation in the first Trump administration, we didn't see a challenge under First Amendment grounds until the final rule was published. I don't know the industry is going to wait. I think it's going to be interesting to see how this situation develops, given that the agency has now stated in the unified agenda that they're moving forward with revising this rule. So, yeah, I think there's a number of things that could happen. It's a developing situation.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the time we have for today. But this has been Virginia Foley and Jason Kober from the Promotional Intelligence Podcast. We are committed to providing you guys with timely, relevant information and a detailed analysis of what's going on. So if you like what you hear and see, follow us on YouTube at Compliance Forward. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day. We will keep you posted. We'll be watching this one like a hawk. All right.